CREATE is part of the Department of Homeland Security University programs, which is under Science and Technology. Essentially, it was a big initiative after 9/11 to get universities involved in developing new technology to help in any way we could to combat terrorism and to mitigate against the impacts of terrorist attacks. You might ask, well, what am I doing involved as a psychologist? And it turns out it's very difficult to do the kinds of policy analysis and the kinds of decision and risk analysis without some consideration given to the human aspect, not only from the standpoint of the public who responds to a terrorist attack, but also with respect to the psychology of the terror. First one I'll talk about is how people respond. It turns out people do respond in ways that are different than a natural disaster. They respond in ways that, in some sense, amplify the actual risk that's involved. This phenomenon is called social amplification of risk. And so one of the things that we do is study how people would respond to an attack. That's the most recent study we've done is how people would react in Los Angeles if some group suddenly decided, much like the sniper attacks in Washington, D.C. many years ago, decided to start attacking gas stations. And we were particularly interested in whether people would process the information they're getting from the news in a more rational way and say, okay, there's this many gas stations and this many attacks, and so the more attacks there are, the more likely I am to be a victim. Well, it turns out people ignore that. The attention to is the trajectory of the attacks. Are they increasing or are they decreasing over time? So that was something else that we studied, different kind of attack that we studied. But all of this research is really looking at the dynamics of people, of the public response to a terrorism attack in the days, weeks, months following the attack. Is behavior permanently altered over some period of time? What can the government do in terms of communicating the actual risk and helping people understand how to best deal with these risks over time as well? The other type of research that I've been involved in is really to try to model how terrorists think about their decisions about what to attack. In this recent case we heard about in New York, we know that the terrorist group was casing out various targets. They looked at Wall Street, they looked at Grand Central Station, they looked at Times Square, they looked at a lot of different targets. They ignored other targets. And essentially we've thought of Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations, Hezbollah, as the same way you would a Fortune 500 company. Basically they have strategic objectives and they go about initiatives to accomplish those objectives. So for example, training people to fly airplanes, that was an objective, or that was a strategy that they engaged in order to meet an objective of flying planes into the World Trade Center and other targets. Evaluate those from the perspective of the terrorists, not from the perspective of DHS or the United States public, but from the perspective of the terrorist organization. And from that, we're able to get some sense about the relative desirability of these attack targets and these modes of attack for a particular terrorist organization. It's important to think about the likelihood that a terrorist organization is going to attack a particular target or use a particular method of attack. And that's what that research has been aimed at doing.